Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sherman Saxton. Tonight, I will discuss in my presentation as to why China and the United States are belligerently laying claims to the international waterways in the South China Sea. I will use historical comparative information to demonstrate what led up to the war between the United States and Japan during World War II and how it bears a striking resemblance to the current hostilities between the United States and China in the South China Sea. In addition, I will examine the psychological behavior of nation states and the role it plays in their decision making process in regards to foreign policy. For my presentation, I have chosen the methodology of historical analysis as a means of comparative examination to demonstrate the events that led up to World War II between Imperial Japan and the United States and how it's reflective of the current situation and hostilities between China and the United States in the South China Sea. By drawing parallels between the two events, it may be possible to get a better understanding on why China has taken the aggressive steps in the South China Sea and the United States have made counter military moves in the region. But first, let us pose this question. What are sea lanes and why are they so important to a nation state's financial survival? Well, sea lanes are shipping routes, or roads, so to speak, in the ocean that are designated waterways for commercial use by countries that sign binding international agreements to navigate for commerce and trade. Well, to show you how important shipping lanes are, an estimate $3.4 trillion, all going to China, has passed through the South China Sea in 2016 alone. This demonstrates how important the international waterways are to maintaining China's economy. Now we must put the issue of sea lanes in its proper historical context as it relates to their strategic value and as it may serve as a prediction to the current hostilities between China and the United States. We must first look at what caused the war between Japan and the United States over 80 years ago. The Japanese knew they had to expand in rapid form. Why? Because Japan, in the early 20th century, was one of the poorest nations in the world, and in some cases, the government cannot afford to feed its own people. This led to some extremely hard decision making by Japanese leadership, meaning the industrialists, politicians, and military planners, who all knew the road to power would lead to a direct military confrontation with the United States. The ideological framework for the transformation of Japan was a jingoistic manifesto called the Tanaka Doctrine. The Tanaka Doctrine was not a written manifesto nor an actual paper document, but instead a set of tacit principles that the Japanese people knew from grade school children to a soldier in the field. They were values to live and die by if the Japanese people were to achieve success on the world stage. The Japanese industrial might, along with its military strength, started their ascension to power. The Japanese army defeated the Russian army in Manchuria in 1910. The Japanese made military incursions into Southeast Asia in 1930s. The belligerency of the Imperial Japanese Army caught the attention of the United States, whom also had economic stakes in the Far East Pacific theater. The propaganda machine of the Japanese government was to appeal to the other Asian nations that were under European colonial rule. The Japanese propaganda machine was shrewd in how they dealt with the other Asian neighbors. Their approach was to gain the support of other Asian nations in the Pacific. So they spoke the language of the other Asian Pacific people. They came as friends, as liberators, chanting, "We are all yellow men to the Yankee. Let us unite against a common enemy." The United States Navy, under the command of FDR's administration, started naval blockades of Japanese naval vessels in international waterways as response to Japan's military aggression. The United States government wanted to create an economic stranglehold on the island nation of Japan, knowing the island nation imported 95% of its commerce at the time. This is the reason why the Japanese planners decided to bomb Pearl Harbor to defeat the United States Navy and beat them at their own game. Is there a possibility the United States and China will repeat history? Is a military showdown between China and the United States inevitable? Will the United States resort to blocking the shipping lanes to China commerce? Is there a countermove by the United States to counter China's military expansion in the Pacific Ocean? Could this be the motivating factor behind China's aggressive foreign policy? I have demonstrated the strategic significance of sea lanes and the parallels between the past and the future. Now, I will look at the behavior of nation states and their leadership. The question must be asked, what makes them think? What do nation states act belligerently towards other nation states? Does their thought process have a direct correlation on the public policy and on public policy making? Does the proposed theoretical approach that nation states do in fact take on the personification characteristics of an individual, meaning that a nation state does exhibit the behavior of a person? Then the decision making process is based upon the needs of the body, which in turn act in concert with one another. As I discussed earlier in my presentation, the Japanese people knew the road ahead of them would be the long and possibly confrontational. So the body, the leadership, and the citizens all function as one. The decision-making process is done only on the basis of collective group effort for the benefit of the whole. In the case of China and leadership, we can see similar patterns in their behavior as far as interaction between leadership and people. Let's take a closer look. What is driving the current policymakers in Beijing? What is the Chinese leadership mandate to its own people? Well, in 2017, the Chinese president outlined his vision for China's future for the next 5 years. He reaffirmed the role of the Chinese Communist Party and socialism in the everyday life of the Chinese people. This new model of China, internally and externally, policies has invigorated Chinese people at home as well as abroad. Fear can be a major factor in how leaders can control or motivate their population. Let us keep in mind there are Chinese people who still can remember the days when the massive starvations happened. The fear factor can work in favor of a leader. If he or she can keep pointing the fingers at the bad man across the ocean, he can command his audience. The past 20 years, China has rose to become a major player on the world stage. China has flexed its economic muscle in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Pacific Ocean. In conjunction, they have also increased their military spending, an estimated military spending only second to the United States. The United States spending $7.17 billion as China is $266 billion. In my conclusion, as you can see, with China trade flourishing and the military doubling in size, this is raising some alarm in many circles, as Japan did 80 years ago. With what I have presented to you tonight, I will leave you with this question. Are we bound by history to repeat the same mistakes as the past? I leave that question up to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for my presentation. Good night.